Hi, thank you so much for coming out for this talk. This is a great turnout. I know there's always other talks going on at the school every day, and we really appreciate you coming to ours. My name is Gabriel Wilgen. I'm the co-president of the Harvard Law School Animal Law Society. And on behalf of the ALS and on behalf of the Animal Law and Policy Program, who is co-sponsoring the event, I just really do want to thank you for coming in and showing up for this amazing talk. I'm particularly excited about this one because the speaker, Jo-Anne McArthur, happens to be a friend of mine. Jo is a fellow Canadian, fellow animal activist, and more than an activist, she's also a photojournalist, an investigative photojournalist who's doing something that I don't think any photographers are doing in the world in quite the same way. She's traveling the world, visiting up to 60 countries, I think, so far, exposing terrible cruelty that's happening to animals, whether it's wildlife, animals in captivity, animals in research, animals in puppy mills. She shines a light in the darkest places, often under very difficult circumstances, very long days. Seems like every time I exchange an email with Jo, she's somewhere else in the world, covering some very difficult topic off on her own. For instance, she was in North Carolina earlier this fall, covering the devastating effects of Hurricane Florence on the pigs and other farm animals and chickens and fish who are affected by those floods. So if any of you have seen any of the coverage in The Guardian about those floods and saw the photos, most likely the photos that you saw were photos that Jo took. And that's just one example of the type of work that she's doing, really exposing us to the realities of the Anthropocene and its effects on the animals that are trapped within it. There's, as you probably have already heard if you've seen the posters around, there's also a full-length documentary called The Ghost in Our Machine with Jo as the subject of the film, her and the animals that she's working to expose, working to introduce the public to and introduce their problems to the public about. So I really encourage you all to come to that. It's at 5:30 tonight at WCC 1015. There will be vegan pizza served of multiple types from Sassafras, so definitely won't go hungry there either. I'm just very excited for this talk. I know there's a long list of awards that Jo has won that she asked me not to get into because she's very, very humble and she thought it would be boring, but it is a very impressive list of awards and it's continuing to grow all the time. And when she accepts these awards and accepts lots of other major speaking engagements, she's not just using her lens to speak up for animals. She's also using her voice, and she's does so in a very kind and compassionate way that's accessible to a lot of different audiences. So I think you'll really enjoy this talk. So everybody, please give a warm welcome to Jo-Anne McArthur.
Thank you. That was a really good overview. Now I don't need to say anything. I can just show some pictures.
Great. One more thing. There'll be sign-in sheets going around the room. Please do sign up if you haven't already. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay, well, this is the last speaking engagement on a 3-week speaking tour. So I've been telling different stories to different audiences, and today I'm just feeling very casual about it, and I just want to tell you a whole bunch of stories. It's maybe a little less formal than what I would normally do. So here we go. Animals in the Anthropocene is the title of this talk, and my We Animals team has advised me not to use the word Anthropocene because people won't understand what it is, but I figured it was okay here with this audience. It is, of course, the name for the proposed name for the current geological epoch in which we dominate everything, global planetary domination. People often say, okay, Jo, talk more about yourself. People want to hear about you, which is why I'm starting with this picture, which is a photograph of a very old photograph. I took this picture on film 20 years ago. So just a little bit by way of introduction of how I got started with this work. I was hiking in Ecuador in 1998 and as a tourist, and I came across this monkey who was chained to a window, and there were lots of other tourists standing around as well, taking this same image. And they were taking the image because they thought it was cute and funny, and I was taking the image because I thought, well, maybe this can be proof of some kind. Like maybe I can do something with this image to help the animal, give it to an authority or something. And I mean, this picture remains, and I think for me it was the starting point of photographing animals in the Anthropocene. And I realized that my point of view, compared to that of all the other tourists standing around me, was actually more helpful to the animal than what they were doing. And it was around that time that I was, basically finding my story. Photojournalists are always looking for their particular story that they can tell to the world. So 1998, that was around the time it started. Now, I'm starting with this story for no reason. I just want to tell this story. It's called Rachel's Promise. And this skip ahead, I guess, anyway, 2009 is when I took this story. This is Rachel in the picture. And Rachel was a young woman who went to Africa to volunteer for 3 months. Cameroon specifically, at Ape Action Africa. And she went to volunteer for 3 months, but 3 months became 6 months, became 12 months. This is a place that was taking in orphans from the bushmeat trade. And this place was poorly run, and she had all these 1 week old, 1 month old gorillas, chimpanzees that were in diapers and that she was bottle feeding. And after a year, she made a promise to these gorillas, this particular group of young gorillas, that she would not rest until she could build them a proper sanctuary home in the forest. Now, skip ahead a bunch of years, and my trip there coincided with the fulfillment of her promise to these gorillas. So that's what you're seeing here. This is the small enclosure they lived in. And she's spending time with them in this manner because once they move to the 200 acres, she doesn't know if they're going to want to spend this kind of time with her again. And it was really special to see her interacting with them. This is Shay. He's 8 years old. He's 8 years old in this picture, and he's definitely too big to be on his mom's back. And how adorable that he's holding her boob. I just love that. So the next morning, they had to sedate each gorilla one by one, and Rachel was a typical worried mama. And one by one, the gorillas went to the vet clinic where they had vaccinations and all manner of health checks to make sure they were okay for the big move. And then the big move. Now, you should never get in a car with a gorilla. It's inadvisable. You may get an award-winning picture, but you can also die, so don't do that. Now, Picken, who is in the arms of Apollinaire, Picken, this is her caretaker, and she really trusted and adored him, which is why when she woke up early from the sedation, she didn't freak out, even though she was, in an unknown situation in a car of all places. And there I was in the front seat, nervously taking pictures, thinking I could be in real trouble right now. But it worked out. This image recently won some major international awards, which is, I only point out because of that, I'm being invited to speak at wildlife conferences around the world, which is hilarious because I'm not a wildlife photographer. I'm not a pet photographer. People don't know what to call me. And so, for me, like actually some of you guys, animals are my clients. I'm not a photographer of animals. I'm not a wildlife photographer. I'm an animal photographer for animals. But I digress. Can everyone hear me okay still? Yeah? Okay, good. So Rachel was on the other end in the new satellite cage as the gorillas woke up, just to make sure that they were unafraid and, getting them settled into their new surroundings. And she spent 2 days in that satellite cage with them. And it's funny, as a photographer, you go into a shoot and you have this idea about where you're going to get your best pictures. And for me, it was going to be the big release. Here they go off into 200 acres, but I could not get a good picture to save my life. I mean, look, I didn't know where to stand. And once the gorillas went out into the 200 acres, I couldn't really see them. And so I got these crappy pictures, but I mean, it's part of the story, so I include it. It turns out, of course, that the good picture was this random moment. So here we are. Rachel opens the door. She doesn't know if they're going to be even too afraid to go out into the new space, but they did. The photography became difficult because the gorillas are running off, and she's running after them, and I'm running after her. And she stopped. They were gone off into the forest. And I took a picture of her here. She had a good cry, and then she threw her arms up into the air and said, "Okay, big man," referring to God, "you can take me now. I'll die happy." But of course, she did not die. She is the executive director now of Ape Action Africa, and she is the caretaker of over 350 primates. It's a fantastic place to volunteer if you ever want to go and help out. And looping this back to us, I mean, this isn't just a problem over there. Everything is so international these days. Bushmeat is a problem here as well because in major cities you can buy a chimpanzee steak on the black market if you want it. Very expensive. You can buy a gorilla ashtray, a hand ashtray, all of these horrible things. It's $1 million industry. So all of the things, all the places I go, they loop back to wherever I am, wherever we are. Now skipping kind of randomly over to North Carolina. Gabriel mentioned that I was there recently. It was stunning to go down there and see that there were absolutely no journalists whatsoever. I mean, especially photographing the animals who were basically just quietly locked away into these buildings, to die, to drown. This is what it looked like, and I need all of you guys to be working on ag-gag laws so that I don't get shot when I go to places like this, and so that we can all go and these places should be open to us. We should be able to see who is locked behind these buildings. But we showed up, and we had one farmer's wife say to my colleague Kelly, "If you go any closer to that hog barn, we're going to shoot you dead." And they can actually do that, right? I mean, they can, right, in this country, in North Carolina. I'm not from here, but that's what I hear. So there we were trying to get images of this insanity, this dystopian insanity. And how many of you know Ed Bertinsky? He's a very famous photographer. He has a new huge project right now called Anthropocene. And I was so happy about this. It's global, it covers mining and climate change and all sorts of big topics, and it does not include animals. How do you do a project called Anthropocene without including factory farming? And I asked him, and he said it's too illegal, which is why I need lawyers to change all that. It's too illegal to document this stuff. And he also said the world needs cheap meat, which made me slam my head against the table. But anyway, we need all hands on deck with this subject matter. And so here are some of my images from the floods, and we see some overflowing hog lagoons there, just manure flowing everywhere, just completely ruining the environment. That could be a poster for animals in the Anthropocene, I think. Surviving cows just taking refuge on a porch there. And we were wading through the filthy sewage of Duplin County, and though a lot of these animals are just locked into the barns, a lot of, because of the floods, the doors would open, and animals were just pouring out through the waters into the communities. And this is what it looked like. They were caught in fences and hedges, and it was really shocking. We actually got sick from being immersed in that sewage. It was really, really nasty. But yeah, I mean, the birds were everywhere. I mean, obviously, this is what it looked like. And here we go. Oh yeah, and I mean, fish also die because of, fish can die from floods, but they also can die because of the runoff from the CAFOs caused by the floods. So the nutrients in the water change and the oxygenation changes. And so, I mean, when people think about factory farming and animals, we don't think about, the effects on the fish. And so we saw this. This was just downstream from the CAFOs. There were easily over 100,000 fish who had perished. And this is Elsie Herring. She's a local activist. She and her family have been living here for generations. And over the years, the industrial farming the hog farms really have just grown up all around her house. And what they do, because there's just so much manure produced, they release it into the air. They spray it as fertilizer for fields and on the fields. And they spray as close as 8 feet away from her doorstep here. And there's really not much that she can do about it, which is why we need you guys on this case as well. So yeah, like I said, there was just no one down there helping, especially the animals, except for the dog and cat people. Bless them. They were, quote unquote, allowed to go out in their boats and get cats down from rooftops and this and that. And so that's how I had any access at all, was just sort of posing. I'm just here documenting the dog and cat people. But we were harassed relentlessly, honestly, by the authorities for being down there with our cameras. The individuals. My work really aims to highlight the individuals because we farm them by the billions and we can't feel numbers like that, of course. I mean, it's the same thing with humans and human rights. And so I need to show the individuals who are caught in these industries, but also who have been rescued from these industries, like Echo here, a turkey who lives at Farm Sanctuary. It's so important to show an individual, an expression, and a context, especially with the floods. I mean, 5.5 million birds were just perished in the floods, and about 6,000 pigs as well, who are totally faceless. Not faceless, faceless to us, you know what I mean. Cut off there. So I do get a lot of pushback about showing this work, and people don't want to look at the work, and it's hard to publish. That's changing rapidly, thank goodness. But political activist Susan Sontag wrote a book on this specifically. It's called Regarding the Suffering of Others. And she asks who should be looking at images of suffering. And her conclusion, you don't need to read the whole book. The conclusion is simple. It's anyone who can help. And when it comes to animals, that is all of us. And so whether I'm asking people to look at chickens or tigers, wildlife, etc., my messaging is quite gentle. It's very Canadian and quite polite. It's please don't turn away. I'm not screaming at anyone because that doesn't work for me. But people are looking more now, and that's why We Animals is growing into We Animals Media. We have a lot of people on the team now, but I'll come back to that. The invisibles. So the animals that I photograph, I refer to them as the invisible animals. So again, not so much the wildlife, not so much the pets. They're often animals we think of as a part instead of a whole. We call them wings, or we call them a broiler instead of a chicken. We call them leather or veal instead of a calf. We call them fur trim instead of a fox or a mink or a raccoon dog. They are the animals we use in medical research. They are the working animals. They are the animals used in religious practices and religious sacrifice. And interestingly, they are also in plain view, these invisibles, at rodeos, bullfights, zoos, aquaria. My most recent book, called Captive, is on the topic of animals in zoos and aquaria, and I do really like this image because look at this, the animal is at the center of everything, as they so often are, and yet we are just not looking, are we? And I find that lifesaver floating there just so unbelievably ironic as well. So the numbers of animals that we use is just absolutely staggering. So again, coming back to showing the individuals and showing stories of hope and rescue, not to give a false sense of security around the good that's happening around all these animals, or a false sense of comfort, but so that we can reimagine things and how things can be and how things should be. This is a plane landing carrying 1,100 birds. There was a farmer on the west coast of this country who was a hen farmer, and he had a change of heart, and he no longer wanted to use and kill animals. So he called sanctuaries around the US and said, hey, can you take my birds? And 3,000, of course, is a lot of birds. But sanctuaries banded together and discussed it. Some took 10, and some could take 100 and 1,000. Now, of these 3,000 birds, 1,100 were flown over to the East Coast to sanctuaries, and that's where this story begins. Actually, I should show you. Maybe some of you have not seen the inside of these places. So this is what they look like. And actually, this was shot with Animal Equality, an organization, who I work with quite a bit. So yeah, birds live in conditions like these, and like these. Even the enriched cages are just absolutely despicable. And so this plane has landed with 1,100 birds, and this was a charter flight donated by an unknown benefactor, who everyone lovingly refers to as the Henefactor, in this case anyway. So the Henefactor's plane has landed, and everyone's really nervous about how the birds have done. And so we've gone from 3,000 to 1,100 to 10 per per crate. And I love the look on their faces, like they just cannot wait to get these birds out. And so here are the birds touching down on grass for the first time. And they were dehydrated. They had all sorts of medical issues, and so they were given sub-Q fluids and everything that they needed. It was quite special. Their nails look like this because they were standing on cage flooring their entire lives. Oop. And they all had mites as well, so they were given a dust bath. And so down to the one, because of course, you know, the face and a name. Face and a name is just so important in the work that we do. And she's debeaked. Debeaking is a practice that happens in many countries. One of the 3,000, but really one of the billions that we consume every year. A big focus for my organization has been transport this year because, again, it's a topic that not a lot of people are looking at or even considering when they think about animals, especially the animals we eat. And so I went to Israel a few months ago, where the Behija, this is a ship called the Behija, is coming into port, into Haifa. And these are animals who've been transported from Australia to Israel. It's about a 3-week trip. And there was actually Lynn Simpson, who some of you guys may have come to her talks. So she works quite a bit. She worked on these boats. She's a vet. And she's one of the whistleblowers. And some of you may have seen just how disgusting these boats are because of the footage that's been coming out. It's very hard to photograph this. I rented a yacht and went out to meet this boat, and it was really, anyway, hard to get pictures, but we did get a few. I did get a few. So after 3 weeks at sea, if you can imagine, in these horrible conditions and the heat and the rocking boats, then they're put onto trucks. It just doesn't end there. 3 weeks at sea, then they get put onto trucks. And then they're sent to places like feedlots and quarantines where they just have miserable existences. And here's another one of those animals on one of the trucks. They get their legs caught like this all the time. And they sometimes break their legs this way because they're being jostled about for hours. And actually, I was with a bunch of activists, and they stopped that truck, and they climbed up, and they liberated the animal's leg, at least. But extremely dystopian, all of this. I mean, to the extent that Israelis are now used to having the bodies of animals washing up on their public beaches. So that's what this is. This is a calf, a decomposing calf. And the animals are often thrown overboard, the dead animals, from the ships. And so this happens. They cut off the ears, they cut off the heads so that there's no evidence because of the ear tags. So you get these headless, earless animals washing up. It's just one of those things you just don't think about when you think about, the animal industry and eating animals. I then went down to the Turkish-Bulgarian border, where animals from all over Europe are shipped down to be slaughtered. What's going on there is highly illegal. Animals in that summer heat are not supposed to be transported over 30 degrees, but it's 30 degrees in all of these trucks. And so we were down there basically collecting evidence and, again, showing the individuals who spend days and sometimes weeks in these trucks. These trucks are massive. Trying to give you a bit of perspective here with the size, and that's me photographing up into the third floor of these trucks. These trucks have fans, but they're often not even turned on because they drain the truck battery. And the animals are also extremely thirsty. They have these small water troughs on the trucks, but they get full of shit and straw, and also the dominant animals will block them and guard them and drink the water themselves. And so if the animals are lucky enough to get out at a way station, they are just trampling each other, trying to get to the bits of water in the troughs, which is what you see here. And this little guy, we named him Ebo. So he was half dead. We don't know if he was born on a truck or at a way station, but he was not feeding, and he was suffering. He was dying slowly and miserably. And so the group I was with, Eyes on Animals, got him veterinary care, which was, saved him from the suffering he was going through. But it's a bit bittersweet because, of course, we don't know what happened to him after that and what kind of life he will have. I'd like to share some happier stories with you again. Speaking of transport and moving on to some rescues. This is Susie and Jay at Farm Sanctuary, and Jay was on a transport truck with 50 other steer, and it toppled and it caught fire, And I know, like, these things happen. These things happen all the time, and we just don't know. So he was the only survivor. He caught fire, and he ran off on fire. Other animals perished, or they were shot, and he survived. And he lives at Farm Sanctuary. And I just love this image of this relationship that she has with him. And we often don't think that we can have any kind of relationship or friendship with farmed animals. I mean, who gets to meet them? I mean, we never do, really. But it is really lovely to visit sanctuaries for that reason and experience that. These are cotton-top tamarins. They live at Jungle Friends Sanctuary in Florida. And they have just been rescued from research. They were used for, I think, 7 or 8 years. They're just starting to explore their surroundings. And I think it's really cute that they look like they're caught in the act. Don't you think? Cute. This is Dino, also at Farm Sanctuary. He was rescued and became the head of the herd. He was kept in a basement for a whole year. Some family who was fattening him up for slaughter. But he had such a great personality that they couldn't bear to slaughter him, so they sent him to Sanctuary instead. And he legit has that smile. That's not just some trickery. And Kenny makes it into all my presentations because he's beautiful. And he lives at Edgar's Mission in Australia. And you should absolutely commit their sanctuary's motto to memory because it's irrefutable. If we could live happy and healthy lives without harming others, why wouldn't we? I just had to, one more sweet picture. OP was left for dead. OP's on the right. Jean was doing an investigation at a farm, and there was a dead pile behind the farm. But OP was on the dead pile, but alive. Jean picked him up and put him in his car, brought him to Farm Sanctuary, where he and staff spent 3 months nursing him back to health. And OP had a really happy 16 years there and had a great friendship with Jean and the other staff. I really am so happy to be a part of the animal movement these days because it's growing dynamically. The diversity is awesome. I mean, we're still doing some of the things we've always done, like protesting like this. I really appreciate that they're doing it with humor. It says, "Get me the cluck out of here." I think humor is very important in our messaging, but it really is an exciting time to be part of all this, especially with, clean meat and the plant-based revolution. Like, we're literally eating our way, as you can see today, right? We're literally eating our way towards liberation. We are, right? Everyone agree? Okay. Yeah, I think so. Oh, why is this slide here? Well, I'm going to tell you about this slide. I've been doing this work, photographing the animals for over 15 years now, almost 60 countries, and it's a huge body of work that needs to get out into the world. So one of the things that we do is make everything available for free to anyone helping animals. So we've established the We Animals Archive. I would love all of you to use it for any of the work that you're doing on behalf of animals. So over 1,100 images and video now, and it's free. And we're able to do that for free because We Animals is now donor-based, which is fantastic. So we rely on monthly donors and grants. So it's a very exciting time to be expanding. And now we're a team of 6. It's not just me, the girl with the camera. And everywhere that I travel, I have noticed that it's mostly women doing the work in animal advocacy. And I wondered if I was just imagining that, so I did some research and saw that indeed in North America and Europe, the animal movement is made up of 60 to 80% women, and yet the leadership roles are usually filled by men. And so I wanted to do a project that celebrated women on the front lines of animal advocacy. So my team and I created the Unbound Project. Sorry, just skipping ahead here, don't want to miss anything. Yes, so I'd like to introduce you to some of these women and some of the stories. The project, of course, has, the famous ladies like Dr. Goodall, who is a big heroine of mine and influence on me, but more importantly, It's been really exciting to feature women who are basically like toiling away in the backgrounds, not getting any accolades whatsoever. Like Lumka Golintete, she is incredible. So she's a first responder. She's the person who gets the phone calls at 3 in the morning that there's some animal emergency, and she gets in the animal ambulance and does the really, really hard work. So we celebrate women like Lumka. Also in South Africa, so Cora Bailey, also one of my heroes. I also really love the intersectional aspect of the Unbound Project. We're featuring so many women who understand that, you know, animal rights does not exist in a bubble. If you want to help animals, you have to help people. You have to work on climate issues. Like it's all the same thing. And so Cora knows that if she wants to help animals, she also has to help people and help get people out of poverty. She works in the poorest parts of Johannesburg in the townships. And this particular story takes place at the municipal dump called the Randfontein dump, and 400 people live in the dump. And it's such a dangerous place to go that even the police don't go. She told me that afterwards because she knew that I would not have gone with her. But she's welcome there because she isn't only helping the animals who live there, but she's helping the people with anything, absolutely anything that they need. And so here we are. They're raising families, and they have cats and dogs, and they're farming animals, and she finds this half-dead piglet. And so my mind's blown, you know, in this place, and we're carrying a piglet around. And that's her son, Moses, ahead of her. And he was there. And so we just started walking around and looking at the animals, and now she's got this sick puppy under her. Is that a name of a band? Sick puppy. I don't know. So now she's got this sick puppy in her arms, and I had never seen anything quite like this. And Moses has now picked up a really sick dog, and we put the dog in the ambulance. And this is not a sick dog. This is just a lazy dog. This is on clinic day, where they walk around and look at all the animals and update vaccinations and whatever the animals need. And clinic day is really lovely because people come, they're very proud to look after their animals well and to show her that they're doing so. And so the kids come with their puppies, and it's quite lovely and loving. So here's a selfie with that piglet. I was so overwhelmed being in this car full of sick animals with this piglet against my chest, who I was sure was going to die, but spot the piglet. So that is 48 hours later, and she survived. She lives at a sanctuary now, and she's a 400-pound pig named Whammy. How many of you know Dr. Carol Noon? She's the founder of Save the Chimps, one of the most amazing organizations in the world. This woman was just so humble and so savvy and fierce. What she did, how her organization Save the Chimps started, was that she successfully sued the Air Force for the 21 chimpanzees that they used to send, into outer space. Now, these are animals, many of them were wild caught, and then as young chimpanzees, they get used in this way, but they're also living with families. They're generally well taken care of, these chimpanzees. But then what the Air Force did was retire them to biomedical research, basically putting them in tiny cages. And anyway, you can imagine just how awful that was. And Carol Noon was like, I'm not letting that happen. And so she successfully sued the Air Force for these animals. So all of a sudden she's like, oh shit, I have 21 chimpanzees. What do I do? Further to that, she also bought the Colston Foundation, which was a biomedical research lab that had tons of animal welfare infractions, and they were closing. And so they made a deal with her that they would sell her the facility and donate the 266 chimps that lived there. So within a year or so, she had all of these chimpanzees, and she raised money like hell to build a sanctuary. And this picture, she didn't want her picture taken ever. She sort of tolerated having me around. But here she is, like this leading primatologist and this kick-ass woman, and she always took part in the cleaning every day. It was really, really cool. And again, she didn't want her picture taken, but she did like this picture because it's not her face, it's her hand, but also she's the one on the inside of the cage. The chimpanzee came to see her while out on the acreage that she built for them, 200 acres, in fact. This is the Colston Foundation. 266 chimpanzees and also other primates, dogs as well, lived here. Row after row of housing like this, completely despicable, highly traumatized animals. But look what she built for them. Let's just look at this picture for a little while. I would like to just look at this for a little while. And she didn't want them to be in cages ever again, and so she built islands for them, 5-acre islands with moats around them. Chimpanzees they don't swim, they're afraid of water, they're top-heavy, small legs, they just can't swim, they sink. And so they aren't ever really going to try and cross those moats. And they have the satellite cage, which is where you saw her hand. Yeah, that's where they can come in to sleep and eat. But essentially, this is what she built for them, and she's an absolute hero. This is Pepsi, one of the residents at Save the Chimps, and Carol was touring me around and meeting the chimpanzees and all this. And then Pepsi, who is unique not only for those golden eyes, but because he has a foot fetish, which is hilarious. Pepsi saw me, and he didn't know me, so he hadn't seen my feet before. And so he started hooting and hollering and pointing at my feet. And Dr. Noon said, "Oh, just show them your feet. We do what we can for them around here. He's been in a cage for 35 years, so show him your feet." So I did. It was really awkward and hilarious. And they do something incredibly special for themselves, I guess. I was going to say for the chimpanzees, but it's a ritual that they have at Save the Chimps. Chimpanzees who've been used in labs know what keys are. They know what they're for, and they know how to use them, and they're always trying to get their hands on them. When you're walking around with keys on your belt, they're looking at them, and they'll try and swipe for them. And so what they do when a chimpanzee passes away is they cremate them with a key, a symbolic key in their hands, key to freedom. And at the Fauna Foundation, also founded and run by a woman, Gloria Grow, I had the opportunity to meet chimpanzees who use sign language. So they had been rescued from behavioral research, and they live here. And how incredible to get to speak to an animal, to converse with an animal, and that's what happened here. We arrived, I was with my friend, and he was holding a Tim Hortons cup of coffee. And the chimpanzee, our relationship with animals is that we stare at them and they stare back at us, and we just wonder about them. But here was a chimpanzee who could communicate with us. And he asked my friend if that was coffee. And so the translator signed back yes. And the chimpanzee asked if he could have that coffee, but with milk in it. It was astounding. It just, and I remember that so often, when I'm pointing my lens at these animals, who is in there? These are not automatons, we know that, right? But there's someone in there. And furthermore, this chimpanzee started pointing to my friend and pointing to his face repeatedly and making the sign for hurt. Are you hurt? Are you hurt? And we realized that because he has really big stretched ears, which chimps aren't used to seeing, the big plugs, he was asking my friend if his ears hurt. Isn't that incredible? That's just so complex. So, Unbound Project. We feature politicians like Marianne Thieme, who's founder of the Dutch Party for Animals. So in her country, she has banned the import of trophy hunts, she has banned fur farming, she has banned wild animals in circuses, and her goal is to ban factory farming in the Netherlands. Pretty badass. The project is historical as well. There are all sorts of people like Fanny Martin. There's very little known about them, and often they're known with their husband's name. For example, she was Madame Claude Bernard. But our historian on the team dug up amazing information about Fanny Martin. So she was married off in, 1870. She was married off to this famous vivisector, Claude Martin, but she was an animal lover. And she was just galled that her dowry was given to him to further his research. And so what she did is that she started protesting outside of his office with her daughter and an increasing number of people. And she also started a home for animals. And what is I have to get this right. So there's many biographies on her husband. He was so famous, and one of them dismissed her as an uneducated woman who made her husband's life a living hell. We salute you, Fanny Martin. All sorts of interesting women. Women entering the growing field of animal rights law. On the Unbound Project site, we have about 45 stories now that we'd love for you to look into and hear about all the cool work that's happening. And for me, this project is about, it's funny, well, I just want to inspire people. I want people to know, like, you know, if they can do anything and advocate for animals. You can be a lawyer, you can be, you know, a neuroscientist, a vet, like these people, like there's all sorts of things that we can do. People like Rabia Hawa, a Kenyan who took a leap of faith. She became the first female Muslim park ranger with the Kenyan Wildlife Services. And Dr. Theo Capaldo, incredible woman who really sums it up with this quote. It's all the same, really. The environment, women, children, civil rights, the animals. It's all about the same thing, compassion and doing what's right for everyone. I do think the future is getting brighter. I'm not naive. I know it's also getting worse. I know that with the growing economies, you know, meat eating is increasing, but because our work is becoming, as advocates, it's becoming way more dynamic. We're seeing a lot of good happen, and I just want to point out some of those things that are happening, but also things that we can do and take part in. So we're bringing humane education to schools. This is a group called the Black Mambas, an all-female anti-poaching unit. So we're bringing humane education to schools. We're eating our veggies. He ate all of that, by the way. He's not just posing for a picture. That's his favorite food. We're learning to avoid tourism that involves the use and abuse of animals. We're speaking up to our political representatives. More and more parties worldwide are incorporating pro-animal initiatives. This was in Toronto when people came down to City Hall to speak up on behalf of supporting the ban on the import and export of shark fin products. We're making art. He's my favorite artist. He's a genius, and I think this is such a great example of speciesism and cognitive dissonance. It's all there. And we're supporting sanctuaries, rescue and conservation efforts instead of zoos and aquaria. And because of all of these efforts, these continued efforts, I think we will see the closure of all unaccredited and roadside zoos. This is something that's achievable. We will see an end to puppy mills. Hello, Gabriel. We have worked together. We will see an end to trophy and sport hunting. We will see an end to bear bile farming, which is now illegal in Vietnam and no longer practiced in over 20 provinces in China. And I left out the bear bile farming story today. I would like to tell it to you, but I think we're really out of time. We will see a global ban on fur farming. This is an empty fur farm. I worked with the SPCA to help close this place because of our investigative work. They were able to press criminal charges against this fur farm, and it closed. We will see an end to the humiliation of animals in circuses. People see these images and they think, oh, this must be, you know, somewhere far, far away 20 years ago, but this was in France just last year. We will continue to see an end to the captive breeding and keeping of cetaceans. And we will see an end to the use of animals in experimentation. When I took this picture, I was undercover. I was posing as a buyer of macaque monkeys. And what he's doing here is showing us his product. That is the wording. Because of this investigative work at 3 macaque breeding facilities, we handed this dossier over to a group who presented it at the CITES convention in Geneva a few years ago, and 2 of the 3 farms were closed down. But will we put an end to factory farming? For me, that's the big one. That's the main focus of my work. And I don't know. I think we need, of course, we need massive efforts on all fronts and in all countries. People often ask me how I do what I do because it's very, very depressing and hard and exhausting work. And I found this quote and it really resonated. you're not supposed to read slides. I shouldn't have had the quote there. I should have just said it. Compassion hurts. When you feel connected to everything, you also feel responsible for everything, and you cannot turn away. You must grow strong enough to love the world, yet empty enough to sit down at the same table with its worst horrors. Yeah, so that is how I feel. And I also focus on good. I focus on change. That's a very important way for me, and probably for a lot of people, to be able to continue basically just putting one foot in front of the other in this big challenge, moving towards animal liberation. And we have to be tenacious. It's a marathon, as you know, not a sprint. And who best to, she really exemplifies this. Joyce Tischler, how many of you know her? Yes, amazing woman who, founded the Animal Legal Defense Fund in '79 when there was no animal law, really. And now she is considered the mother of animal law. And so in closing, I just wanted to shout her out. She's part of the Unbound Project as well. And she's really good at celebrating change and focusing on hope. So I encourage us all to do that as well. And that is it, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo, for another inspiring talk.
Another.
Always inspiring for those of us who've seen you before. We are going to have a time for some questions and answers. For those of you who have to go to class, obviously you can head on out. But we will have a little bit more time going past 1 o'clock as well, if there are people that want to ask questions. We are going to be recording, and so we'll get the lights back on as well. But please do wait till the microphone gets to you before you ask your question.
Try that. Good.
So any questions?
I also wanted to let people know that I do a lot of mentoring now. That's just part of my job. A lot of people write to me and say, I want to do what you do, or can you advise me on more of this kind of work? So you are always welcome to just send us an email, info@weanimals.org, and we can set up a Skype call and just talk about all of these things and ways of doing them. And
Yeah, I wondered, going to North Carolina, did you research the law there, and is there concern, because theirs is written in a specific way that it's just about any sort of private property kind of infringement, and so I just wondered if you were concerned about that.
I was very concerned. Actually, had never planned on going there, especially North Carolina, because of the laws. And so I took my chances. I just thought it was, a very important story, and of course a timely story. And I knew that I was going to hit the ground running and maybe not get anything, but it was still important for us to go. And because of the guns in this country, which is so crazy, I could have pushed a lot farther than I did, but we were just being so observed, and we were always on private property, flooded private property on boats, but still. But I do try and look at the amount of trouble I will get into whatever country I'm in. I mean, in some places life is really cheap. And like with that, the macaque breeding facility, we had no idea what danger we were in until afterwards. And that is wrong, because I need to keep doing this work. Like, for example, one of those farms was owned by this kingpin poacher, who there's like a major bounty on his head, and he causes a lot of trouble in the world. And had we been discovered by him as people trying to expose what he was doing, we would have been killed probably. And so that was a mistake that I won't repeat again. But maybe I did when I went to North Carolina. I don't know. But I try and get advice often from lawyers as to what the laws are where I am. Even just publishing photos of children. My book Captive has pictures of the public and children all throughout it, and I got some advice on that, and they said, well, it's different from country to country. Like this picture in France, they could sue you for this, as opposed to like in the US, they can sue you for this, and here are the consequences. And I was just like, ugh, I really want to make this book, so I'm going to take my chances. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Hey.
Thank you for coming here again. This is less of a question, but since we have a little bit of time, I wanted to ask, like, could you tell us more about bear bile farming?
Yes.
Yeah.
Could even show pictures, but I won't. Bear bile farming is a practice in China and Southeast Asia generally where bears are kept in very small cages. Their gallbladders are tapped for bile, which is used in traditional Chinese medicine. It does have anti-inflammatory properties, this bile, but so does, all sorts of synthetic medicines. So there's absolutely no reason for us to be treating animals this way. It is a practice that is and will come to an end because of groups like Animals Asia and Free the Bears. And they're kept in it's just the most miserable thing in the world. Tiny cages, and they're also kept in crush cages, which is what it sounds like. And there are fewer and fewer animals being used for this. So sun bears, Malayan sun bears, and moon bears are used for this practice. And it's something, again, coming back to, well, what does that have to do with us? You can also get these products here, and you can also support groups here who are helping to end the work there. Yeah. So I've snuck into a bear bile farm. I had 7 minutes there before getting caught, and I was like, "See ya." I played the tourist. I was like, "I love bears," so I wandered into a bear bile farm. Snap, 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 and promptly left. But I've also had the opportunity to visit sanctuaries and to document the rescues of bears from these terrible places. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Jo-Anne. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was just really amazing and moving. My question is just, like, I can imagine how difficult it is for you to get into these places. Mm-hmm. Especially the factory farming. You mentioned the North Carolina and the dangers of that. And I was just wondering, like, do you have a sort of like, what are your strategies? Like you mentioned, here you said you were a tourist, and then there you said you were a buyer. And do you have kind of like a pre-plan, like a reconnaissance? Like, do you have a team of people going there, sussing it out, and then you come up with a strategy before you go? It just seems like so dangerous in some contexts. I don't know. Do you have that plan now, or is it still just by the seat of your pants?
All of the above. All of the above. And it depends on the country as well. And I'm in this unique position as an investigator where I'm often joining a group who's done all of the hard work, really. And I kind of hate sometimes that I get the visibility when all of these groups are doing so much, and the investigators who have to stay undercover for years and stay anonymous for years. And then I go and spend 3 days. They've been there 3 months, night after night. And then, in Spain, across the whole country, they've been doing an investigation for 6 months, and they know every unlocked door. They know every place to put the security guards, and then they need really high quality images. And so they say, "Joe, can you come and work with us for a week or 2 weeks?" And then it's all basically taken care of for me. Security teams are in place. So it's often the case. But sometimes it's me doing the footwork, and it's about, sometimes I say to a farmer or a slaughterhouse, "I'm a journalist. People don't know where their food comes from, and they should know." And they're like, "Yeah, we agree. You can come in and document." There's all sorts of ways to do it. And sometimes I'm telling the truth, and then sometimes I'm fudging the truth completely. I don't like lying because I like people a lot, and I would rather just have open access and an open, honest conversation, but that's not possible most of the time, really, unfortunately. And if I wanted to do things above board all the time, I just wouldn't be getting access. I wouldn't be able to tell these stories and show what's happening. So it's a very shitty part of my job.
I'm curious because you mentioned the people aspect, and so I wonder how you think about the people on the other side, as far as
farmers,
good people,
workers.
are they bad people? How do you think of them?
I don't think of it that way. I'm trying to expose industries and how cruel they are and why they need to change. I'm not interested in pointing the finger at, especially workers in slaughterhouses and farms. And in fact, I have met many workers at these places who have asked me to help them get another job. You know, a lot of people don't want those filthy and often violent jobs. When it's, you know, like the CEO of some, you know, big company, I might feel a bit differently. I might want to have strong words with them, but I never get that opportunity. I mean, where are they? They're often like, you know, some tower somewhere, not doing any of the dirty work. But yeah, I mean, for me, people often say, like, where is this place specifically? Like, we have to close that farm. But I'm trying to show how the industry looks the same, whether it's in Sweden or Australia or Spain. I mean, it's the same buildings, it's the same feeding and watering system, it's the same killing systems, and it all needs to change.
Do you know if there's been an investigation in the Heifer Project?
What's that? Oh, yeah, tell us, in case I'm...
Well, I got a brochure from them. I don't know why, because I've been vegan for a long time, but you donate and they have a live animal they send to usually Africa to a village, and then, you know, you're supposed to be helping this village by giving them a live animal to use.
Yeah, I don't know if there's been an investigation into that. I know there's a lot of talk about how there are just better ways of feeding people, of course. Do you want to take that on?
I don't have a camera.
Another question. Have you started to work with drone photography much at all? Because I know a lot of folks are using that as a way to get into places where you can't get to on foot.
Yeah, drones are huge now in all of this work. I personally have not, and again, it's usually the team that I'm on the ground with who are using the drones. Also because of the laws, like if I'm traveling with a drone, it would probably get confiscated at the airport because I don't have the right permits. And I mean, the permit situation is crazy for drones. I mean, you can't use them in most places anyway, and there's huge fines, and so yeah. But I mean, it is an important part of the work now, especially, I mean, because they can go into barns, you know, from a distance. It's not just about the aerial, but going, you know, right into a mink farm, for example, is crazy. It's really great technology now.
Just one more question. Just because we're here, what for people like you and for you and people like you who do this kind of work, what is your dream legal resource? Like, if you could have, like, what kind of legal resource would you want to have behind you?
Like total immunity.
Yeah, like, well, no. I don't mean
Is what I would
changing
like.
laws. I mean, like, so you have access to lawyers now, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But like, I guess what kind of setup would it be? Like some kind of, I don't know, like, I don't really know. Like,
I've never been
I
asked
think
this,
Sea
and
Shepherd, do they have a whole
They do.
legal department? Like, is that what, you know, people who do this expose work, like, what would be your dream kind of scenario in terms of legal,
Yeah.
not change in laws, but legal backing and it,
It's a good
just
question.
so we know here, like, just put on the record what you want.
Yeah. I'd like someone to create an invisibility cloak. Okay, but I guess the war photographers, the war correspondents, people covering humanitarian issues, especially for major news outlets, they have a lot of protection. They have a lot of backing, but not us animal people. And like, we're getting into lots of trouble as well. We can and do get put behind bars sort of regularly. So it's a really good question that maybe I can't even answer right now. I mean, I'm working in so many countries that it's often hard to get advice for the particular country I'm going to, and I manage, but not always. I mean, and then like the costs that go into, I've been very, very lucky. I would say every one of my investigative friends has been in trouble with the law now, like except for me. So I feel like it's just a matter of time. And of course, that can be just horribly expensive and emotionally draining. Yeah, I don't know what I could ask for. You know, here with all of you, like what Chris, do you want to say something about that?
So it looks like we're going to be starting an animal law clinic here next year, and which is like a mini law firm within the school where we can work directly on sort of litigation and policy projects and research projects. And I wonder if you think there would be value in sort of creating a sort of resource of here's what the various laws are, at least starting off in the U.S. Like here in the U.S. and Canada, here's the various kind of laws for undercover investigators, what you should and should look out for, and like maybe the drone laws in that state or something like that. Does one of those already exist, or would that be a project that might be helpful to what you do?
Well, imagine if that could be an international organization that offered protection to investigators, whether it's or advice or protection or representation. I mean, I guess, yeah, like my team and I, we have talked about that and we sort of dreamt about it. Like imagine if we could have this, but I can't think of, do you have anything to add about that in terms of protecting
I'd like
investigators?
that to exist as well. General Counsel and her network, which I think is what most farmed animal protection groups do, and folks like you and Chris, who we can go to for advice.
There's protection for me in that I put my face to all of this stuff, unlike a lot of investigators, and because I'm sort of known, I think, and also because I don't out particular farms. Again, it's about showing the industry, not a particular place. I think if a farm recognized their farm, they wouldn't really want to identify the shithole as theirs, like, because we go to like we're saying, look how bad this looks. And so there's protection in them not wanting to out themselves. And hopefully also that if they're going to go up against me, then it's going to be very, very, very public. And their reputation might get soiled, I hope.
Any last questions?
So you've never been arrested, which is great, but this is like a very specific question. If you were to be arrested, which I hope never happens, do you have a criminal defense team behind you? Is that funded by your group? No, yeah. So that's, yeah.
What I normally have is like a lawyer's phone number written on my arm, depending on the country, depending on the group I'm working with. But, for advice, if I'm incarcerated or something, like who can I call? And they can tell me exactly what to do and what not to do.
Right, and it varies by country too. So it would be probably prohibitively expensive to set it up in every country. But do any of the groups that you work with have criminal defense behind them, or do you know?
General counsel, basically,
yeah,
but no, nothing major.
Yeah.
Do you want to add to that?
So I manage the communications for Animal Equality. That's an international farmed animal group. We have a general counsel, and she has staff, and then they have a network of pro bono lawyers that we work with, and a lot of those lawyers, or some of those lawyers, have come up through this program. So
Both civil and criminal.
right, and that's incredibly important to have that network, and it's one of the wonderful things about this network here that we can lean on.
As our team grows as well, we'd love to work with some of you. You can come to us with project ideas or writing projects. You can look through our archive, and if there's a particular story that interests you and you want to write about it, or, we're basically becoming We Animals Media, this little agency with a lot more output. So please be in touch with ideas, stories, either things we've already shot or things you would like to work on with us in the future.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm sorry I didn't see the whole thing. I also wanted to point out that animals are also the victims of war. When you were talking about Israel, they have their own Bedouin farmers that have indigenous animals, and the Bedouin and the animals are both victims of the thing. But in war, like when Gaza was attacked, or when we attack Yemen, that animals are also a huge casualty, especially in a pastoral or a farming society. The question that I wanted to ask you, though, was India and China both have battery cages now, but do you know in general, like India lets cows run around and they let monkeys run around and things like that. But they've started to adapt Western practices, and I was just wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, the BRIC countries and the growing economies are of particular interest to my team now because there's so much happening there. With the industries are growing, and so we've just launched the We Animals Asia series, and we want to also be working in places like India, not to take images to bring back here, but to contribute to the groups who are doing good work there. So we're in the process of identifying who are the best groups and how can we possibly help them. And yeah, so there might also be speaking engagements there. There might be for me, oh my gosh, and all sorts of things. So we're trying to find out how we can contribute. Yeah, but it's exciting because when I started doing this work, there were so few people like me doing high quality photojournalism on behalf of animals, especially the factory farmed animals. But now the quality of photojournalism is really high in a lot of countries, and I love it. I love it. Yeah.
So we're just about out of time because there's going to be a class coming in pretty soon. Does anybody have one last question before we go? There also, for those of you who will be coming to the 5:30 film screening of Ghost in Our Machine, there is going to be a Q&A with Jo after that as well. So if there are any questions that bubble up between now and then, you'll have your chance to ask her those questions. But thank you all again for coming. And once again, thank you, Jo-Anne McArthur, for giving us your time.